How's it going? My name is Mr. Milanese, and today we're going to learn how to solve two-step equations. Okay, so we're going to run through a few examples of two-step equations, and we're going to be solving them, and I want you to think about solving these equations in terms of constants and coefficients. So let's figure out what those are. A constant in algebra is really just a number by itself. So for example, 60 is a constant. It's just a number by itself. Coefficients are numbers that are multiplied by a variable. In this example, 11 is a coefficient. And most of the time, you want to think about getting rid of your constants first. So let's take a look at what that would look like in this equation. First of all, I'm going to draw my line right through the equal sign just to help me remember that whatever I do on the left, I have to do on the right. And I said that I want to get rid of my constants first. In this example, 60 is a constant, so I'm going to use inverse operations. The opposite of add is subtract. And so I'm going to subtract 60 from both sides of my equal sign. Here's what that does. That's going to cancel these terms. I've gotten rid of my constant, and I can drop down 11r to the next line. Okay, our equal sign is still in the river, and 16 subtract 60 is negative 44. Okay, so I've gotten rid of my constant. Then the last step is to get rid of your coefficient. And you're going to do this again using inverse operations. So this is 11 multiplied by r. The inverse of multiplication is division. So I'm going to draw my fraction bar, since fraction bar means divide. And I want to divide both sides by 11. Again, I'm doing this on both sides because they're equal. So this cancels out our coefficients. So 11 divided by 11 is 1, and 1 times r is r, so we can just drop our r straight down. And negative 44 divided by 11 is negative 4. Okay? So this is the final answer, and if I wanted to take the time to do this, I can always substitute a negative 4 back up here for r to confirm that this is the right answer. But since this is an online tutorial and you probably have a short attention span, we're just going to go on to the next problem. Okay, so let's take a look at another example. Negative 2 equals x divided by 3 minus 6. So I've already drawn my line, and I noticed that the variable x is on the right-hand side of the river or the line. I said that I want to get rid of constants first. Remember, constants are just the numbers by themselves. In this example, my negative 6 is a constant, so that's going to be the first thing that I get rid of. We're going to use inverse operations. The opposite of a minus 6 is a plus 6, and of course we have to do it on both sides. Negative 2 plus 6 is 4. Our equal sign is still right here in the river. And then we're going to drop down our x divided by 3. Keep in mind, these guys cancel out because negative 6 plus 6 is 0. Okay, so last, we want to get rid of our coefficient. Technically, in this problem, your coefficient is 1/3. You might say, where does the 1/3 come from? Well, 1/3 times x can be rewritten as x divided by 3. The main thing to think about is that right now we are dividing by 3. The inverse is multiplying by 3. So we're going to multiply both sides of the equation by 3. On the left-hand side, that gives us 3 times 4, which is 12. And our 3's are actually going to cancel out. Anytime you have a 3 in the numerator and the denominator, any number in the numerator and denominator, they'll cancel, leaving us with x by itself. And it's totally fine to leave it as 12 equals x. Sometimes you'll see people flip that and say x equals 12. Again, you can double check yourself by substituting this number in, but we're going to go ahead and go to the next problem. Okay, so let's see what we can do with this problem. 4 minus 3n equals 43. First step, I always draw my line. Now remember how I said we want to get rid of our constants first. Take a second, maybe even pause the video, and see if you can identify which of these numbers is a constant. In this problem, 4 is a constant. It's a number by itself. So that is the first thing I want to get rid of. This is a positive 4. How do I get rid of a positive 4? Well, we would subtract 4. That's the inverse. So I'm going to subtract 4 from both sides of the equation as my first step. That does cancel our 4's over here. Be super careful. As you drop down the 3 in, please take the sign with it. So it's really a negative 3n that you're dropping down. 43 subtract 4 is 39. Okay, Now that we've gotten rid of our constant, now it's time to get rid of the coefficient. Remember, coefficients are numbers that are multiplied by a variable. In this example, my coefficient is -3. That's -3 times n. So the opposite would be to divide by -3. So we're going to divide by our coefficient, which is a -3, which causes these guys to cancel, and we have n by itself. 39 divided by -3 is -13. So our final answer is n equals -13. Okay, so how about one more problem? Let's take a look at this one. N plus 8 divided by 5 equals 8. First step, as always, is going to be to draw our line. Now, you gotta watch out on this one because this problem is tricky.
It's tricky.
Remember that I said you want to get rid of your constant first. Remember, a constant is just a number that's by itself. It's really easy to look at this problem and see the +8 and think that, well, you're going to get rid of that number first. Here's the only thing that's different about this. I call this an invisible parentheses problem. The reason is because technically this whole quantity, n plus 8, is in parentheses. Now, they don't always show that like on a worksheet or in a textbook, but it is there, and it affects the order of how we solve this problem. We are not allowed to subtract 8 as our first step because it's in parentheses. So therefore, we actually have to get rid of this divide by 5 first. As long as you can see that, it's no problem because we know how to get rid of it. Divide by 5. The inverse of divide is multiply. So we're going to multiply both sides of this equation by 5. Our 5's cancel and we can drop down the n plus 8. 8 times 5 is 40. This looks a little bit more manageable now. Now you notice I did drop off my parentheses at this point. They're not really necessary to have. And then so now all I have to do is get rid of my constant, my +8. So the inverse of +8 is -8. So we're going to subtract 8 on both sides. That causes our 8's to cancel, and we have 40 subtract 8, which is 32. Again, this is the right final answer, and you can be sure by substituting it in to make sure that it turns out to be a true statement. The only reason that these are tricky problems is because, again, you kind of have a tendency to look at that and want to subtract 8 first. But remember, that's an invisible parentheses problem. So go ahead and draw in your parentheses, and then remember that you have to get rid of the denominator first. So that is a little bit about how to solve two-step equations.